Angel 1, Retainer 4-2, requesting spiritual danger close on my position. Requesting spiritual danger close on my position. How copy?
Hi, this is Logan with Spiritual Danger Close Podcast. Normally episodes are the narration of my blogs which come from my thoughts on a particular subject. And learning of what it means to live spiritual danger close requires to have an open conversation with knowledgeable individuals. Today's episode reflects that idea and hopefully helps you with your spiritual discipline. Today's speaker was requested by me or those who follow the blog or podcast. If there's a conversation you'd like to hear or wanted to comment on today's episode, please do so. I hope you enjoy the conversation that you're about to listen to. All right, I'm Logan with Latter-day Retainer Spiritual Danger Close Podcast, and this is my guest, North Korean
Elliott.
Liberation, aka Elliott. So
more like Elliott, aka North Korean Liberation Front. But
sorry, it's 9 o'clock where I'm at. It's early in the morning, so if any of us are off, it's probably going to be me. I do apologize. But today we wanted to talk about physical fitness. We noticed there's a lot of conversation on Twitter and then Facebook about hashtag DesFit. People trying to have a conversation with a mindset of physical fitness and Latter-day Saints and how we can achieve that. And so reaching out, wanted to talk with Elliott here because he's definitely shown a lot of physical fitness related items on his feed, so I felt like we could have a really good conversation and that you might benefit something from that. So I messed up earlier. He actually went off on this really great tangent, so I hope he can hit those points. But we kind of want to discuss 4 things today. The law of health, word of wisdom, modesty, and just some miscellaneous things, and then whatever comes off, whatever we have. So again, sorry to make you repeat yourself, Elliott, but if you want to go ahead and kind of capture what you said before.
No, you're fine. And I might backtrack a little bit and state my credentials more so because I'm not someone that walks around with a six-pack. I'm not like a bodybuilder that's done shows or a powerlifter that's done meet or a strongman that's done shows. I am definitely stronger than your average man, having lifted weights for over 5 years now. And I feel like I have more of an idea of what I'm doing than your average guy that kind of just goes in the gym and hawks it. But I worked out as a teenager, came back from my mission, went to college, got married, got caught up in stuff, developed some really, really bad habits with food and a bad mental relationship with food that I still struggle with. And at one point was like 5'10", skinny arms, but 240 pounds, obese, and just looking absolutely horrible, right? And while I still carry more fat than I really wish I did, I am nowhere near those levels anymore, and I carry much, much more muscle mass, and I'm in a much, much healthier place now. So I consider myself not the math tutor that was a math whiz, but the math tutor that struggled with math and learned it the hard way. And so while his credentials don't look as impressive, I can maybe provide more empathy and insight and more different solutions for people where the conventional solutions aren't working as well, right? So that's where I'm coming from. It's sort of a school of hard knocks position of I've made all the mistakes and I've learned to correct them the hard way. And that has its own precious lessons that you learn that way. So we were talking about... sorry, what was that?
I agree. A little bit like growing up, I started watching a lot of the Tour de France, and so I really was inspired by Lance Armstrong, and I started riding a bike everywhere. I pretty much did that, and I was skin and bones, probably about 130 for a good majority of my teenage years. Lost a lot of that teenage fat from eating power bars all the time. And then go on a mission, and all of a sudden I lose even more weight because of missionary life, and then come back, and then I end up trying to join the military, end up doing that. Some stuff happened, and then boom, I'm almost 200 pounds, not doing well, and then I started myself on physical fitness journey and pretty much dabbled in pretty much everything you could do except for competitive shows and weightlifting competitions, but that's kind of what my journey is at, and I've definitely learned a lot, and especially with traveling the world, I definitely can tell that I notice who the Americans are because they're generally the fatter ones, and I don't mean to say that in a derogatory way. It's just it's a fact, right?
Yeah.
So
on the one hand, you can be glad that our society is wealthy enough that the problems that have plagued humanity for all of its existence, hunger and malnutrition, are non-existent in our country. But on the other hand, you have to be realistic about the fact that the new problems that pose themselves are still significant risks, and that they still need to be addressed, even if it's better than starving to death, right?
Oh, yeah.
We wouldn't want to. I would choose obesity over severe malnutrition, but given a third option, I would choose neither. So we were talking before the computers decided to record us about what is healthy in Latter-day Saints, and I was basically saying that I think that there are obviously things you have to do in this life, like baptism, marriage and whatnot. Mandatory things, saving ordinances, a lot of them are called. But then there's a lot of things where if you have the means and resources to do them, God expects you to do them, and it's a good thing to do them, even if it's not technically a priesthood ordinance or taking the sacrament or something. And I think physical fitness falls under that, right? I don't think God is going to have the same expectations for personal maintenance for a very poor saint in the third world country who's scraping to get by and working every waking moment of their lives just to support themselves and their family or something. But someone in my position, where I absolutely have the resources and ability to take better care of my health and pay attention to those things, I think that he expects that of me, and that's a reasonable expectation. So health for Latter-day Saints definitely is about balance, right? And that's something I think a lot of people, when they're trying to get into fitness, so to speak, sometimes miscalibrate, is they see the examples, maybe in their friend circle or maybe in social media, of people that are putting disproportionate amounts of resources into fitness that the average Joe can't afford, right? And they think that that's how they have to do it. But that's not necessarily the case. If you're a shift worker working 12-hour overnight shifts, you should not try to structure a training program that looks similar to an IFBB bodybuilder or an Olympic level weightlifter, right? Because those people have a lot more physical resources that they can dedicate to recovery or what have you. You should still do something, but you have to be realistic about what you can do given your situation. When I say you have to be realistic, really just comes back to that question of balance, right?
Yeah.
If you cannot work out 2 hours every day, don't adopt a training program that requires you to work out 2 hours every day, right? If you don't have enough money to be buying organic Wagyu, Japanese hand massaged steak for your meals, for your nutrition, then don't be doing that. Just get you the generic ground beef for now, right?
Yes.
So you absolutely should do these things, but you have to keep it in perspective. Now that second point you had outlined, I've never worked out before. How do I start? That's another great one, and I find that a lot of people get hung up on conventional wisdom there, because if I ask you, if you want to lose weight, if I ask the random guy on the street, if you want to lose weight, what should you do as far as exercise, what do you think their answer will be?
They really don't know how to do it, and they'll probably refer to, on TV I saw, or on social media.
Yeah. They might parrot some stuff, right? And then they'll probably say something like cardio, like running, right?
Oh,
that's in my experience what most people default to is they say, oh,
yeah,
well, you should,
running.
If you want to lose weight, you go running, right? And to be honest, yeah, that works for a lot of people. But it's one of those things where conventional wisdom is so widespread, it almost gets to the point where almost everyone has heard it, and almost everyone that can try it has tried it. And there are people for whom it works. There are people for whom, you read about it in magazines where it's like, I was 350 pounds and I got sick of it. One day I decided to run a mile. I just ran a mile every day, and now I'm 180 pounds and it works. But there's just as many people, I suspect, if not more, for whom running just straight up doesn't work. If it worked, it would have already worked, and they wouldn't be fat still, or they wouldn't be out of shape still, right?
Oh, yeah.
So that's where I think people kind of can pigeonhole themselves into thinking, well, if you want to lose weight, that means you have to diet, and diet means you have to take out everything out of your diet that's bad, and you have to run. And if you're overweight, running is one of the most miserable things you can do. And again, if you want to try it, go for it, and it could work for you. All right. Some people are just built different, and they enjoy the misery, and then they stay at it for so long that it's no longer miserable, and they're good at it, and that's great. But a lot of people, they don't succeed at that. A lot of people don't succeed at trying to cold turkey strip all the soy or the oil or the sugar or whatever out of their diet, and then they just collapse. They feel bad because they failed at this thing they're trying to do.
And then they binge harder and
exactly
and go into it. I feel like Latter-day Saints, I feel like we're sort of vulnerable to the culture, especially in the United States, of back in the earlier decades, fitness was a part of the everyday curriculum for public education. You went to gym class, you learned how to do that, climb rope, you learned how to work out, and it was more of this calisthenics-based knowledge, where so you don't really see that much unless you are on a football team or you're doing something for the cheerleading team, and even then, how many of them actually go through and learn that? So I feel like culturally, we see a lot of advertisement from these companies that push running and stuff. So I feel like that's another reason why there might be this drawback of, oh, I need to be healthy and I need to run. And I really feel like we're kind of hindered that way, to where that's like the only way we can do it. And I know a lot, even in the military, everyone's like, oh, I need to run, I need to run. There's tons of ways to be healthy and fit that don't necessarily involve running, like you said.
And I don't know if you saw my thread about that topic.
Oh yeah, that was kind of what triggered this whole conversation with you. And I was
that's right. That's right. Yeah, you messaged me after that.
We need to have this conversation. So.
Yeah, and I'm not going to repeat the whole thing here, but to summarize, essentially, especially as it pertains to running or cardio in general, if someone is obese and trying to lose weight, and I talked about it in the thread, that's a stressor, that's a negative thing, right?
Yeah.
And they already have a lot of negative energy, frustration, disappointment in their life because they're carrying around this extra weight that they're ashamed of. And if you then give them a mode of exercise that sort of multiplies and magnifies the shame and makes it more intense for a short period of time, the chances that they'll stick with it are greatly reduced. Now, ideally, they should stick with it. They should just bite the bullet, suck it up. But we're working with human beings. We know that that's not always the case. We know that we eventually give up on something if it's too hard for too long. And that's why I specifically recommend weight training for people that are struggling with their weight, is because a lot of them are naturally already strong because they have to carry on all this extra weight. They're not, squatting 800 pounds or anything, but they have an inherent advantage, especially in lower body strength. And when they go to the gym and they're able to leg press half a stack more compared to their skinny friends, that makes them feel good about their body, maybe for the first time in ages, and that makes them more likely to stick with it. And as they train with weights, you can recomposition your body, you can reduce the amount of fat you're carrying, increase the amount of muscle, increase your metabolism, because muscle is more expensive to maintain than fat. And then over time, as you care about the weight training and the results, more changes will come organically. That was my experience, is that over time, I made more and more changes to my diet organically without feeling forced as I got back into strength training, because I wanted results from the strength training, not because I wanted to change my diet for the sake of changing my diet, which had already failed me multiple times before.
Oh, yeah.
So,
I feel like another thing is, it can be like insurmountable odds. It can feel like that, whether you're somebody who's very obese or somebody who is skinny fat, who doesn't really look fat, but when they take their clothes off, they don't feel good. They don't really see their stomach as well. And then the anxiety of how do you start? You've never worked out before. It can be so insurmountable, and I feel like people can kind of scare themselves out of doing it because that's easier than doing something uncomfortable. And that, like you said, often people probably choose the option that's not really good for them. So I feel like that's going to be a benefit of this conversation today, because there's a lot of options that are available. And I feel like we talked about earlier, going to running just isn't going to work for somebody like you said. I feel like we should learn to do something that's just active. There's a lot of research that shows that if you're just active and doing something, you're going to be healthier than somebody who's more sedentary.
Absolutely.
Whether it's, you take the elevator up to your office. How about taking the stairs? At least twice a week. Just twice a week, take the stairs up to your office. That'll be such a huge game changer. And while that doesn't seem big, it really is big, and you can help tackle the anxiety of, oh no, I have to work out, 5 times a week, I have to eat 7 meals or whatever you're trying to do. It breaks it down and it kind of like decreases it, and you're like, oh, this is easy. Monday and Thursday, I'm gonna walk the stairs to the office.
Yeah, I mean, little changes like that absolutely do add up. And that was something I was actually going to bring up later. I'll address it real quick now, since it kind of came up with what you're talking about. Is oftentimes people feel like they have to make all the changes at once, and I think that is, again, if you want to, try it. If it works for you, like, God bless you, it worked, awesome. That's a big win. Take the trophy. Most people, it's not going to work. If you try to change everything once, you try to cold turkey change everything at once, that's too much. I remember there's a bodybuilder guy I follow on socials, and I've used some of his programs and his work before, Mike Israetel of Renaissance Periodization. And I remember he talks a lot about, like, training for people who are advanced level strength athletes or bodybuilders or whatever. But one time he was talking about what he would do if he was training just a straight up fat office worker type. And he said if someone just had an uncontrolled diet all the time, what I would tell them to do first is just to eat clean during the workday. They can still eat junk at night like they have been, but they just need to eat cleaner during the workday. That's it to start, because you don't want to prescribe too much change to the point that it doesn't stick. Right? If you eat donuts at night and you eat pizza at work, maybe at work instead have a healthy sandwich, and then you can still have your donuts that night. Well, guess what just happened? They just decreased their caloric income. Guess what's going to happen now? They're going to lose some weight while still eating donuts. That sounds like a win, right? Well, will that last forever? No. Eventually, 6 months, 9 months, a year, 2 years down the line, they will eventually need to stop eating donuts every day too. But you don't have to make them stop eating donuts now. They can start becoming healthy while still holding on to 1 or 2 more things they have now that they like. That's what happened with me. When I started tracking my macros and trying to get more protein in, I realized that I was so fat that my daily caloric intake was so high that if I just ate very lightly at work, I could still pick out on junk food at night. And I lost 40 pounds doing that.
That's amazing.
It doesn't work for me anymore, but it did then. And I'm really glad that I didn't try to force 100% of all the changes at once, because I would have just failed again.
I feel like we're jumping around. I feel like we should kind of talk about this, the 10% rule. It's more down towards our conversation on modesty later on, but the 10% rule is you never want to do more than 10% of what you've done. So if you've never run a mile, you never want to run more than a mile that week, because if you go beyond that realm, you can end up hurting yourself into there.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is, if you start adding in all these little things of like eating meals 7 times a day, eating clean, you're working out, and you're doing all this regimented stuff that you've never done before, that's more stress on your body that it's not used to.
Absolutely.
And then on top of it, you really don't, if something starts going wrong, you don't know which one is it causing it, so it's even a bigger, oh no, I'm starting to feel pain or whatever. How do you know it's just the diet, your body just, you really don't know. And I feel like the best method is to kind of figure out what you want to do. Is working out more important, or do I need to work on my diet? And then slowly add these things in there to where you can track, oh, okay, I've gone too far today. I need to kind of like back up and do a little bit more segment. Because I feel like people just want to get into it, and that's when they end up rushing themselves, and they want that. They want to be at the finish line without doing the work.
They see the guy on Instagram with big pecs and rock hard abs, and they want to imitate what he's doing. But the truth is, someone who's at an advanced level of fitness, what they're doing should not be imitated by someone at a beginning level.
Exactly.
You don't, like, it's like, I remember that I was reading the other day about how Elder Holland was like studying the Apocrypha in his scripture study. And it's like, that's really cool. Elder Holland studying the Apocrypha. Now, if you're an investigator studying with the missionaries, you should read the Book of Mormon, right? Milk before meat. It's the same thing with fitness. Before you go looking at what Arnold Schwarzenegger did in the 1980s or 1970s when he was at the height of his career, you should probably find something that's more suitable for beginners now. And then in 6 to 12 months, when you've gotten a foundation, then start looking at branching out. Exactly. I like that 10% rule, because you're absolutely right that there's so many birds that try to take flight and they fall to the earth because they try to fly for too long or too hard or into too much wind. And it may sound, I don't know, I hope it doesn't sound like I'm trying to tell people, no, you can't do this. You're not good enough to do this, because that's not what I'm saying. There are people that are good enough to go cold turkey and go 0 to 100. And if you can, awesome, good for you. But most people can't. And all I'm trying to do is tell those people that can't do it that way, they can still do it, that there's nothing wrong with them. They're completely normal, and they have to take it in a more controlled, approached fashion.
Exactly. It's like using the natural man to your advantage, because we're so hardwired for goal and success that at the end of the day, we just want to feel successful. And if you start throwing in all these different factors that you've never done before, the outcome is likely going to be failure, and then it's going to make you least likely wanting to do it. But if all you're doing is deciding to eat chicken, broccoli, and rice for your lunch at work for 5 days a week, and you do that, it's going to be so much easier when you start changing and doing all these other things of like, okay, I'm just going to have some egg white toast and a glass of milk in the morning. It's going to be a lot easier doing all this other stuff instead of just throwing all the darts at the board and getting stressed that you're not hitting bullseye.
Yeah, and people underestimate the power that you receive from success. If someone feels like a loser, but then they have an unmitigated success, that's hugely empowering mentally, physically, and spiritually.
Exactly.
Someone who is constantly taking punches to the gut by life, when they land a solid one on life's jaw and they see life stagger backward, that's an amazing feeling. And that makes it easier to stick with your changes and then to make incrementally more changes. Like you said, eat healthy lunch at work and that's it. And then when the weight loss stops, then swap in a healthy breakfast, 6 months down the road. And then when the weight loss stops again, look at swapping in, adding in a healthy dinner. And now you only eat junk food or whatever on the weekends, and you're eating healthy all week. That's night and day different from before, where you're eating crap all the time.
Exactly.
And those kind of subsequent changes are possible because you're succeeding at the small intermediary steps.
Plus, you start to learn the one thing that if I really wish people knew more. There is research that shows that just working out one time a week can have such a major benefit to your mental health. And people that work out get this. Like when you're injured, like when I was just injured from my shin splint and bone fracture, I was miserable. I couldn't do anything. I couldn't even do upper strength training because I was weight limited. I was absolutely terrible. And now that I'm starting to add into it, now it's rough because I've not done it for so long. But I'm starting to feel confident and good about working out. And I feel like once people get that addiction of that post-workout confidence of, oh yeah, I just did that, it makes it a lot easier, whatever it's doing, like running around the block 5 times a day.
And that's a good addiction. You want that. It's like being addicted to reading the scriptures every day. So those are the addictions that you do want, right?
Exactly. Like I follow a friend from the mission. He was best friends with one of my companions I came into, and he slowly started posting on a fitness app called Strava, and he started just running down the end of the street, and sure enough, almost a year later, he's doing a full marathon. And then I see him posting photos with the neighborhood kids because they see this guy running down the street every day. Why is he doing that? And so now he's infecting other people with that. And I feel like that's why it's kind of important for Latter-day Saints to learn that fitness is also a part of the law of health.
Absolutely. There's many cases of that. If you just start, incrementally, start slow, take it easy on yourself. so many people kind of shoot themselves in the foot by going over enthusiastic early on, and like you said, like they can get hurt, and then they're sitting there confused, like, why did I get hurt? You know, was it this, or just, even if they know why, they're just discouraged anyway, being hurt, and they decide, I obviously can't do this. Can't describe the number of people I've met that are like, oh yeah, you strength train, I used to too, and then I hurt my shoulder and I had to stop. And I'm sitting here thinking like, oh, that's cool. I've got a chronic injury in one shoulder and recurring pain in the other that comes and goes. I've got a knee I had to have surgery on. I have a wrist that absolutely refuses to cooperate everything. I had a hernia. I hurt my back once, and a lot of this happened because I was stupid, not because I was strength training, because I was strength training with stupidity. And you don't have to go through all these injuries like I did. You can do it the smart way.
Yeah.
My point is that I have figured out how to continue in such a way that does not aggravate these injuries, does not make them worse. And in fact, if you continue to find ways to work your body that don't aggravate injuries, they recover faster and they recover better. When I was like trying to recover my back spasms, and I was, not really doing super direct stuff for my core, my back kept spasming. But when I finally figured out that my back was spasming because my abs were weak from recovering from my hernia surgery, and I started doing direct ab work, the problem literally went away, disappeared in about a month. So don't let injuries hold you back. I promise, if you think that you can't do X, Y, or Z, there's someone who has done it, that has figured it out, how to do it despite that injury, and will achieve excellence you can never dream of if you give up at the first sign of trouble. Or if you straight up feel like because of whatever problem, you can't do weight training anymore, then look at boxing, look at cycling, or look at running or rucking or whatever. There's still other ways that you can be fit that maybe won't aggravate your bad joint or your bad muscle or whatever. Don't just throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Exactly. Are you familiar with who Matt Frazier is? He's a World CrossFit Games 7-time champion. He pretty much pulled Lance Armstrong in the CrossFit Games. And
well, I got a psychic in the Google results. That's the wrong Matt. Matt with one T is who you're talking about.
Yeah. He was recently on a podcast talking about how he got started, and you mentioned injury. He literally got started into CrossFit because as an Olympic lifter, he was injured. I want to say a herniated disc is what really did it, or something. He broke something, and he couldn't start working out like that, and he ended up in CrossFit circles. And so sometimes I feel like people are too afraid of injury, and like I feel like we should embrace it. It's going to happen, and we should learn from it. Something I learned with my knee injury was my knees are weak and I don't stretch right, and so that's been very impactful. My knees are now twice as strong. I already know what I need to do. And so I really feel like if I learned how to run properly before I started doing this, it would be a lot easier. So I really feel like if you're going to start doing something, learning and getting knowledge of how to do it correctly is going to be so beneficial, because you don't want to start going into the gym and trying to mimic these movements that you've seen without knowing how to do them. And it does matter. It really does matter, especially when you start getting old and you don't have as much testosterone or correct estrogen. Recovery is just going to be so much harder on your body. And so if you learn how to do it correctly, you're going to be less injury prone. And that's going to be a world of difference, especially if you're trying to reward yourself of continued commitment into this endeavor of trying to be healthy, and for whatever reason you chose to do it for.
Absolutely. I remember there was a blog post I once read by a strongman, Mythical Strength is his pen name if you want to look him up. But he talked about how people asked him if he's afraid of injury. He's like, well, not really, because if you're competing, injury is part of the game. And if you allow yourself to be afraid of injury, then you will never get one loop around the track in your little red wagon of fear. He's like, well, meanwhile, when I'm racing around my fearless race car, by the time I get injured and recovered and I'm back at it, you still won't have caught up to me. So it's like there's two aspects to injury. One is you should avoid it with knowledge and proper preparation. And two, you shouldn't be afraid of it. Right?
Exactly.
Because it's not the end of the world. The human body is designed to repair itself. And it's the year 2021. we know enough about physical therapy, about recovery, about how the body works, that you can probably, and surprise me all the time, look up your problem, correctly self-diagnose and treat it, and fix it at home. If you're talking about like minor lifting or running related injuries or what have you. I have fixed a surprising number of issues with my body by simply Googling stuff and figuring out how to fix it and doing the stuff myself.
A bag of ice goes a long way.
I'm not a big ice guy.
Oh, okay.
I'm much more big on just rest. And proper nutrition and being smart with your training.
No.
I think that oftentimes there is such a thing as excessive inflammation for sure, but oftentimes inflammation is part of the healing process, and I'm scared to reduce that. I don't even take ibuprofen. I don't think I've taken ibuprofen in years.
I can't say that. I chugged 1,500 milligrams today, so I'm definitely of the different mindset, and I guess that's because of the military in me. Change your socks, take some Motrin, drink some water is typically the holy trinity of how to fix yourself in the military world. But yeah, also I feel like injury can also be an insight of, hey, you weren't doing this right. You probably should learn how to do it correctly.
Absolutely.
Like I learned that on squats, while I was able to lift a lot of weight, I didn't have the correct mobility, and I was really hurting, and that's why I was putting extra pressure on my knees. And so what that was an insight of, hey, you should learn how to do more mobility work, stretching, and be able to get into a good squat before you start throwing on stupid plates and, satisfying the ego. So I feel like if you're common sense about it, you can kind of step back and be like, oh, okay, how did this happen? How did I get here? And I feel like that's going to be more rewarding, and it's going to keep you in the game longer.
Absolutely. You got to see it as a lifelong pursuit with incremental gains over time, and that your knowledge will also increase along with your physical fitness, and you'll constantly be sort of reevaluating things as you go, and incorporating new ideas and new methods into your training. And some of them will pan out, some of them won't, and that's part of the journey. You got to not be afraid of actually wasted a little bit of time in hindsight. That's part of the process.
Oh, yeah. I feel like there's so many different avenues that people can explore, that it takes exploring to find what's your niche, right? Like how I mentioned earlier, Matt Frazier, his dreams were set on going to the Olympics for Olympic weightlifting. He didn't know at that time when he was injured that he was going to be a 7-time world champion in CrossFit. So we really should see the benefit in things. Maybe you get introduced to marathon running and that's your niche and you're able to run 300 miles. That we really are amazing human beings down to it, and our ability to heal is really important. And
absolutely. In fact, if you want a cheat code to figuring out what you're good at, obviously this isn't a 100%, but this is like a good 50% cheat code. Figure out how you're built, like your proportions, and then look up like what are people like X good at. Like for example, and this is something I talk a lot about on my Twitter. If you are on the shorter side of things, then typically speaking, you probably have a relatively longer torso compared to your limbs and shorter limbs compared to your torso. You're probably going to have a hard time deadlifting because deadlifting favors good leverages along a short spine and longer limbs because you can get your torso in a more advantageous position. Whereas if you're shorter, have a longer torso, you're going to have a lot more shear force along your lower back, and you just have a worse amount of leverage, right? But you'll be great at squatting, bench pressing, and overhead pressing and that kind of thing, because those, if you have short legs, your range of motion on squatting is smaller. If you have short arms, your range of motion on benching is smaller. So you can kind of sort of hack into the system and cheat and find out what you're good at potentially ahead of time. And it doesn't just apply to lifting, obviously. If you have, I'm trying to think, like, I'm sure that there's things I don't know about what makes people good at throwing a shot or jumping hurdles that I just don't know. I imagine hurdle jumpers need to have long limbs or something like that, and I'm just ignorant because it's not my field of expertise. My point is that if you know you're built a certain way, go ahead and figure out what people like you are usually good at and give that a shot first. Because there's nothing quite as nice as being good at something, right?
Exactly. Like I feel genetically disposed to what I really want to do, egotistically, if that makes sense. My dad is pure Scottish on his ancestry. He's 6'5". By the time he retired from his career field, he was 300 pounds in his prime. Just a big man.
Yeah.
My mom's side of the family is Dutch and Italian, and so that mixture of genetics doesn't really go well. And so really trying to find my niche, bike riding is something I was really good at, and I kind of wished I was kind of pushed a little bit more into it. But I've come to find out that I'm also really good at swimming because I've got these long arms, and while I'm not really good at it because I'm not experienced, I can go faster in the pool than somebody who's been doing it a little bit longer because my body's into it. Now, when it comes to the bench press, yes.
Yeah.
Terrible.
You'll struggle.
It's terrible. I've not been able to get above 220 is my max on bench, and I was like, that's close to 225. I'm good. 5 more pounds, five more pounds.
Just lie and pretend that the bar was heavier than it was supposed to be.
Yeah, you guys see that? I got 225.
The manufacturers of like the plates in the bar are allowed some amount of wiggle room in how much they weigh.
Oh yeah.
So just tell yourself that every single bar and plate that you used was on the higher end of that, and it's probably close to 225. So you're fine.
I had a friend, he could not believe that I could deadlift 350 for 5 times in a row and could not bench 225. And I was like, look, bro, I got some of the good genetics. Let me have what I have, right?
Absolutely. Like my squat has been held back for years because of like injuries that keep flaring up. Hopefully I'm over that now, but like the most I've ever squatted is 365, which is not very good at all considering my build and my amount of experience. And I sounds like an excuse, but I really do ascribe a lot of that to just the injuries and difficulties I've encountered. But my max bench press is 330. It is not normal for someone's bench and squat to be that close. It's really not normal at all. So that's part of the fun thing about fitness is learning about yourself and learning about what makes you special, what makes you weird, and in what ways you're normal, and kind of figuring out how to work with the body God gave you, because there's very few straight up no upsides, all downsides bodies out there. I know growing up I was really frustrated because I have a very narrow frame. Like I don't have very broad shoulders at all. My build is very narrow, and it's not a traditional masculine looking build, because the sort of masculine stereotype is like big broad shoulders, right, and that triangular upper body. What I found is that because my frame is so narrow, if I put like any amount of muscle on my pecs or my trap muscles or my upper back, that they stick out prominently because there's nowhere for them to go. And so it's like, well, growing up I was so frustrated, but like there's a silver lining to that, right? In that it makes me look buffer if I work on these muscles much more easily than someone that's built differently than me. So you got to figure out what you're working with. You have to appreciate the silver linings on your cloud, because again, a lot of it comes down to motivation and discipline. And the more positivity and the less negativity you have, the easier it will be to maintain that baseline level of discipline and motivation that you need in order to stick to what you're doing.
Oh yeah, the reward definitely cross at a certain point, and once you start getting the rewards, that's where you have a lot of that mental health that I was mentioning earlier. Like, wow, I did that. Especially if you get in whatever you're doing, whether it's CrossFit, functional fitness, weightlifting, running, whatever your goal you're trying to achieve, the mental high you get from reaching whatever that goal is so beautiful. Like the amount of endorphins and dopamine hits that you're getting off of that is just it's beautiful. You can't really replicate that without doing it, and that's something I feel like if people could if you could take what that tastes like when you hit whatever you're trying to hit for the first time and give that to them in a pill, that there'd be workout addicts everywhere.
Oh yeah. So a lot of people that just don't know what it feels, what it does for you, and if they did, they would want it much worse than they do.
Exactly.
All they see is the upfront initial cost, and that's one of the reasons why I advocate strength training specifically for overweight people, is because the payoff for doing for sticking to a cardio regimen is like 8 weeks out. With strength training, the first few workouts you get really sore and it can be a little miserable, but within the first 2 to 3 to 4 weeks you get stronger. Like your muscles adapt really quickly. So the first positive feedback loop happens in a fraction of the time. And that's the real kicker, is you need people to get that endorphin rush of, oh my gosh, I did 200 pounds on the leg press for a set of 10 my first day here, and that was tough. But I just did 200 for 10 and I barely felt it. I better add more weight. Holy cow, this is amazing. Look at what my body can do.
Oh, exactly. And I feel like we've kind of danced around it, but I feel like we could talk about the question of, so you've kind of worked your way through, you need to work out, you want to do it. So do you need a gym membership to start this journey?
The answer to that definitely depends on what you're trying to do. If you want to run, then you obviously don't. You just need a pair of running shoes. If you want to strength train, and if you don't have, weights handy, and you don't have the means to just drop a bunch of dimes and buy weights, then you probably do need a gym membership. When I got back into lifting, I had a free gym membership with my employer, but then eventually my wife encouraged me to start slowly but surely buying equipment to have at home. So instead of going to the gym 3 times a week, I was only going once a week for stuff I needed there, and then lifting at home twice a week. And now we have enough that I haven't been inside a public gym since long before even the pandemic happened, when that no longer became an option. So it really, again, kind of depends on what you're trying to do.
Oh, yeah. I don't know if you saw that on Twitter. Somebody was complaining about Utah's options for gym are Vasa Fitness and CrossFit boxes. And I laughed because last time I was there about 3 years ago, that's exactly what you saw everywhere. And 24-hour fitness. And I feel like it could also be daunting. I feel like a lot of people may feel very uncomfortable with their body, especially if that's why their motivation to work out is they want to feel more attractive. Going to a gym, you have all these beautiful people per se, and they could feel uncomfortable. And then they're new to working out, and so they're using all these light weights, and they may be doing it wrong and a little awkward with how they're doing it. So I feel like getting a gym membership would be very important, and I feel like there's cheap ways to do it. I definitely have gone to the YMCA. I've gone and paid $2 an hour, but at the same time, I know in my mind there's people around the world who are working out with sand and empty milk jugs because that's the only thing they have, and so I feel like you shouldn't limit yourself to a gym, but there's a lot of benefits that come to it. And I also think that you'll have a greater interaction with people who know what they're doing. Whereas if you just go online and do an Amazon shopping spree and you buy all these weights, you won't know, hey, you probably shouldn't do that because you could hurt yourself. Or maybe if you're trying to do that, you need to have a spotter. So I feel like there's pros and cons.
I think also there's definitely exercises that beginners should probably use first before they try to branch out. I know mine may be a bit of an iconoclast, but I think that beginners should probably avoid straight bar deadlifting and straight bar squatting in favor of trap bar deadlifts if they have access to one, because it's much more of an intuitive movement. You're much less likely to injure your lower back because the weight can be more centralized. While it still uses your lower back muscles, there's less shear force. And then as you do that, you start learning how to move your body efficiently. And then when you want to straight bar deadlift or back squat with a barbell, you're much closer to it. I'm not saying you can't. If you want to, back squat your first time in the gym, absolutely go for it. It just, some people, squatting comes very naturally. And for some people, it actually can take a very long time to figure out how to do it comfortably. And if those people would rather just do something else that's a little bit easier first, that's kind of what I think they could consider.
Oh, yeah.
As far as a gym membership, honestly, CrossFit boxes have a lot of equipment. I don't know what the prices are like, but if you want to be serious about fitness at some point, you're going to have to commit some resources to it, time, money, and, sleep, recovery capacity. You're not going to get around that commitment. At some point, you have to say, hey, you know what? buying a rice cooker is an extra expense, but I could eat more rice and that's healthier, or maybe buying a Dutch oven to make your own homemade bread to eat instead of eating cheesecakes from the bakery. It's an expense, but if that's what you need to do, then do it. I think that's something a lot of people fail at, is give yourself permission to have what you need to get the job done, right?
Yeah, there's a lot you can do. I know so this is the one thing, I have a love and hate relationship with CrossFit. I want to make it clear, I was going to pay to be CrossFit level 1 certified, but I had a deployment, and I went on the deployment, and I kind of went a different route. But I'm pretty certain if it wasn't for me having to cancel that, I would be level 1 certified. I do like CrossFit. I feel like there's a lot of benefits. One of the things I do like is you can get these CrossFit packages from these companies that give you a rowing machine, some barbells, some weights, some ladders to do skill work on. So if you look around online, you can find these like little home gym stuff if that's something you're into and you want to do. And then as far as learning how to do it correctly, have you heard of what's his name? He does Athlean X on YouTube. That guy is amazing. Professional physiologist. He's showing NFL football players this is how you correctly work out. He's doing he's pretty much giving you a $2,000 trainer course for free. Just watching his free YouTube videos.
I've heard of him. I've never used any of his stuff, but I've heard good things about him.
I'm trying to remember his name, Mark Caviar or something.
I know who it is. I've just never used any of his videos.
I highly recommend those videos, especially if you've never done anything before and you would feel uncomfortable asking for help or you can't afford to have a trainer. His videos are top notch, and I've actually done a couple of his programs. And he does the do you have a gym and do you not have a gym? Let's do this, or there's definitely ways around it, and it takes a little bit, and I feel like a Google search you can get going in the right direction. Now as far as picking, obviously you're very pro weightlifting. I would say more of Olympic weightlifting is more of your route from what I've seen you post.
No, not really. I don't do any. I don't do snatch or clean or jerk at all. Okay. First of all, my ceiling is too low.
Oh, yeah, that would do it.
Where I lift. I've got nothing against it. It's just not what I do.
Oh, okay.
I just do sort of traditional strength training of centered around squat, bench press, and deadlift. I don't do powerlifting meets, but it's essentially powerlifting style training interspersed with phases for hypertrophy focused work to make sure that I'm bringing up lagging muscle groups and making the muscles I need to move the heavy weights bigger so they have a higher strength potential.
If you were to give advice to somebody, should they just go straight to the gym and start picking up iron, or is there something they can do before they go to the gym to kind of like prime their body for that?
I am going to go the road less traveled and say pick up the iron.
Okay.
Honestly, if you're trying to start with something and you want to start lifting, me gatekeeping you by saying, well, here's this 2-week at-home stretching program to do first, it's probably not going to help. The other thing I've noticed, too, is that it's really impossible to practice good form without having weight in your hand. I've recently I had to change up how I squat to make sure that it's better fit because I'm just coming off a hip injury, to make sure that it's not hurting my hip and that the way I'm squatting is advantageous for my build. And there's absolutely no sense of if what I'm doing is right or wrong until there's decent weight on the bar. Because you can squat 135 with horrible form one-legged, and it doesn't matter because 135 is child's play. But once you start getting, 225, 315 plus on the bar, that's when you actually learn about, is your form good? Is it efficient? Is it crisp? Right? So if someone wants to lift, I would say just go lift. You can learn anything you need to learn about lifting in the act of lifting. And I think a lot of people hurt themselves because they don't know how hard to push it. And I think going to failure once in a while is good because it's a good depth check to see how much water is in the well, so to speak. But in terms of eliciting a reaction from your body where it repairs the muscles and makes them bigger and stronger, You don't have to go to failure. This is a scientific fact. We know this. I was chatting with a guy on Discord the other day from the DesFit forum, and he was like, hey, I'm feeling absolutely beat up. I'm losing motivation to work out and everything. I'm getting weaker. What's going on? So I was asking him some questions about his sleep, how much he was eating and stuff. And then he mentioned that he was going to failure on every set. I said, oh,
that's why.
Well, we can stop the conversation because that's the problem. Stop that. My advice to people, blanket advice, is the first, and different exercises are different people are different. So over time, as you learn, feel free to branch off from this advice a little bit in your individual case. But the first rep that significantly slows down, noticeably significantly is slower, generally speaking, is when you have about 3 reps, maybe 2, maybe 4, but somewhere in the neighborhood of 3 reps from absolute failure. And that is close enough to failure to elicit a reaction from your body. If you go further than that, you're just incurring a bigger recovery penalty at not much more benefit. There has to be a balance, right? Like, circling back to the very first thing we talked about, you have to get your body to react. Like when we lift, because we're sending our body a message, because our body is stupid and can't read. I could type out on a Word doc and say, hey, build bigger muscles and make them stronger, but it doesn't work. So instead of typing a letter to my body, I lift the weights, right?
Yeah.
I'm just sending my body a message. And we know how to send the body a message, and we know that there's not extra benefit to italicizing and underlining and bolding the message, so to speak. Just send the body the message. If you're feeling really hot and you want to go out once in a while, absolutely, that's what going to failure is for. For when you're feeling really good and you want to max out the number of reps or the amount of weight, or if the program calls for it, then Godspeed, you have my blessing. But the vast majority of your workout, you should not be going to failure. You'll save your joints, you'll save your muscles, you'll save a lot of pain. And speaking of mental health, like, if you get to the point where your body can't recover from the workouts and you're getting weaker, that's a nuclear bomb on your mental health. When we're trying to give your mental health an uplift, you'll just tank it harder, right?
Yeah. I feel like something that people will learn, that there's a phrase, it's called plateauing. Your body is pretty, like you've said, dumb, and it doesn't like doing things. So what it tries to do is be more efficient at what you're doing so it can do it easier and expend less energy. So if you're doing the same thing every single week, eventually it's going to be easy because your body's learned, hey, we're doing this so we can do this. So something you have to do once in a while is change it up. And going to, failure maybe a little bit more often may be the way to do it, or doing reverse hypertrophy workouts, or changing it up. Maybe instead of doing legs on Monday, you do them on Thursday, completely different, and just swapping it up. Plus, it's refreshing on you mentally because it's not that way. Unless you need that reaffirming habit forming. We do Mondays are leg days. We do chest on Tuesday. We just go through the rigmarole of the whole process. That's fine. Some people can do that, but
I find oftentimes plateaus too are just from your body has adjusted to what you're doing, and you need to do more. A lot of people that lift give up after about 3 years. And that's not coming from me. That's something I've seen from like Dave Tate and people who have been in the field a lot longer than me, have seen a lot more. And that's because if you're doing a cookie cutter program and that's it, then you're probably going to stop seeing gains from it. After 3 years, you get discouraged and you stop. It's that principle in the Doctrine and Covenants, many are called, but few are chosen, right? Many people walk into a gym, and if you go to a gym and lift consistently and sleep and eat right, in 15 years, you're going to be jacked and super strong compared to the average guy in the population, right? But we don't see all these jacked, super strong men and women running around, because many are called, but few are chosen. Because just like in the gospel, where people are not willing to make the sacrifices that Christ calls on them to go from a telestial to a terrestrial to a celestial level of living, many people are not willing to make the changes necessary in the gym. If you're going to get to the point where maybe you need to do more volume, instead of doing 3 sets of bench press, maybe you need to do 4 sets of bench press now, right? And that could simply be it. Like when it comes to, progress, if your body is refusing to budge, sending it a stronger message can be the ticket. The other thing often too is eating. And this is counterintuitive because we're talking about losing weight and the obesity crisis, but your body needs fuel to build muscle. Muscle is expensive. It hates building it. And if you get to the point where your body's not getting any stronger at 180 pounds, maybe put on 10 pounds.
Oh, yeah.
You will get stronger. You'll get bigger muscles. You see these bodybuilders that are 250 pounds, and yes, their physiques are unattainable, obviously, if you're not living in the gym and, doing extracurricular supplementation, shall we say. You're not going to be 300 pounds off-season, 250 pounds stage weight as a regular guy not supplementing stuff. But if you are 180 pounds or 160 pounds or whatever, and you want to eventually be jacked in 220 pounds, should you spend most of your time maintaining your weight, losing weight, or gaining weight? Mathematically speaking, you need to spend most of your time gaining weight. But a lot of people are scared to do that, either because they don't want to get fat, or they used to be fat, they're not anymore, and they're scared of falling down that same rabbit hole.
Oh, yeah.
It's that principle many are called few are chosen. Like, my lifts have periodically stalled, and they move again when I allow myself to put on more mass, to put on more muscle. And you'll put on a little bit of extra fat too, but you know what? You can lose that fat later, and you'll keep most of that muscle you put on. So if you're 180 pounds, you bulk up to 200, and then you slowly cut back down to 180 or whatever, your second round at 180 will be with more muscle and less fat and more strength than your first round. That's what bulking and cutting cycles are all about if you really want to get down to the weeds. But that's more so like inside baseball talk. If someone's listening for a perspective on starting, that's sort of calculus. Right now you're studying algebra. Right now just go to the gym, eat a steak along with your donuts and lift some weights kind of thing, right?
Exactly. And while we're talking about it, I feel like this is a good time to bring it up. You need to track your workouts. At a certain point, you need to start doing that.
Yes.
Because that would be...
I agree.
It's like a journal, right? A spiritual journal. And you're kind of writing down what you've done. And you can see if you hit one of those plateaus, why am I only able to run 10 kilometers when I've been training to run 20? And you could see that, well, no, I've been doing, not enough interval training. I need to do that because my heart rate. Or, I've been doing 5x5 training in the gym, and I'm literally doing the same weights over and over again. Obviously, I'm not gaining that weight gain that I want to see. So,
Yep. And that's something, funny you mentioned that, because my wife just the other day was looking at one of her old training logs, and she was like, wow, I used to struggle squatting 95 pounds, and now squatting 95 pounds is like barely even a warm-up for her. She squats over 2 plates. She squatted 227.5 about a week ago. And if you look at people who are successful and advanced in their training, I would say probably 90% of them will recommend keeping a training log. If for no other reason than looking back and seeing how far you've come, or if you're struggling, looking back and seeing when you've succeeded before and what you did to overcome any hurdles. Like I definitely at times have felt discouraged. Is like, I feel like I've been lifting for 5 years. I should be so much stronger. I should have so much more muscle. But when I look back at what I used to do, I'll be like, wow, like I've come a long way. Or I look at this old picture, I was like, geez, like my shoulders are much bigger now. My pecs are much bigger now, like my glutes or whatever. Not that I'm checking out my own butt here, but it's the fact that all these muscles are all bigger and stronger than they used to be. And looking at old training logs and old pictures of myself, I can see that.
Yeah, it helps you really kind of track that, because the biggest thing is you can't notice changes in yourself. If you really want to know how much your body's changed, you should go see somebody you haven't seen in 10 years, because they're going to be amazed at the way you look. And those journals are an insight. Now, there's a disagreement between whether you should do it on paper or an application or phone. I really think that's just kind of silly. I feel like there's pros and cons to it.
The least important thing to worry about. Do whichever one you want.
Yeah, I feel like find the one that works. I know some dudes that get those silly little journals that you used to get in grade school. The little checkers on the front. Is that the one you use? There's I've seen dudes where they literally sweat on them. The papers are all furled from the sweat, and they're sitting there writing in pencil what they just hit with their pre-workout shake still going on. That they just hit whatever weight they're doing. And I've done that. And I also pull my phone out, and I already have an application, whatever it's tracking. I say I mainly do the latter more because I'm doing more cardio-related activities like cycling, running, and swimming. It's just easier to do it that way. But I feel like you hit it right. It doesn't really matter. You just should do it.
Absolutely. Like 90% of stuff when it comes to fitness, there is an optimal answer, and it's irrelevant. Optimization is a trap. Like, it is good to know what's optimal, but oftentimes you have to work with what you've got and do what works for you, do what you like. Like, volume is optimal for hypertrophy, right? For you want bigger muscles, you have to do more sets. There was a while, I think about 6 to 12 months ago, where my wife had just come off a strength program that required very long, grueling hours. And she was like, I am so done. Like, I'm going to switch to a hypertrophy program. I'm going to do the minimum amount of volume. And just 2 sets of each exercise. Now, they were quality sets, big range of motion, like very good quality, but she was only doing 2 sets of each exercise, which was like the minimum that the program writers prescribed as the minimum effort needed. And she saw great results from that round of hypertrophy. She fully recovered and bounced back mentally and physically, and her muscles got bigger from just 2 sets of each exercise. Was it optimal? Well, no. Optimal probably would have been, 3 sets or 4 sets or whatever, but totally worked for her. And that was eye-opening for me too, realizing like, dang, you don't have to go balls to the wall. What you really need is consistency and doing what works for you. Like, if you're really tired every time you go into the gym, maybe cut back on some of the work you're doing. Maybe get more sleep. You don't try to fit a square peg into a round hole.
I feel like I can relate to this a lot better because when you're doing more endurance style athlete training that I do for triathlons, whatever it is I'm trying to do, if I eat something during the workout and I don't feel good, I'm not doing that again. Now, if I have something, I love to get it. It's a special osmotic water with saline solution and a sucrose in there. I love those things, but they're like $90 a case. When I take those, my body feels optimal. I'm not all groggy. I'm not feeling the food slosh around. There's an optimization. I feel like we really should listen to our bodies, not give in, right? Because our bodies want to stop. But I feel like we can say like, maybe I should cut back on the broccoli. That's not really good for me. It makes me bloated.
Exactly.
Listening to what our bodies want to do. And that's great. Your wife, in fact, that's even better. She does less and gets more out of it. I feel like that is the best optimization. But that's different for every single person. Now,
people overestimate how much is needed for results chronically. Part of it is that you watch these motivating movies where some guy is sprinting up and down a hospital 75 times every day to prepare to climb Everest or something. Your average Joe does not need to do that kind of crap. If you want to, go for it. And if you can do it, awesome. You can make fun of me later and tell me that you told me so. But your average Joe doesn't need to do it. Your average Joe can progress from 2 sets of 5 different exercises 3 to 4 times a week. If it's just quality, good, muscle-focused movement. You don't have to go crazy. You don't have to give up your life. You don't have to give up time with your wife and kids. You have to sacrifice some time with family or some time from work or some time from gaming or other hobbies you have, but you don't have to sacrifice all of it. Nowhere near. You can easily make these changes and keep your life to a great extent the way it is now.
There's a rest in peace, a bodybuilding influencer, Rich Piana. He passed away from complications. But something he said on a video was so profound. He kind of was speaking to 2 groups of people. He's speaking to the people who go to the gym all the time like him, who are trying to, train for professional reasons of trying to, bodybuilding shows or weightlifting competitions, whatever it is. And he's also speaking to the people who go to the gym and are doing something. Stop judging people and realize that people are doing what they need to. There was a video recently on TikTok of this professional Olympic pole vaulter who was doing 425 quarter squats, and people in the gym were making fun of her. The comments were making fun of her. And this dude just got on there and he said, shut up. You don't know what her training method is. for her and her body and what she needs to do. 425 quarter squats to maximize, those glutes working out is what she needs to do. Stop judging people for something funny. Now, if somebody's doing a workout wrong, that's different. Now, if they're being specific and, she's got a lot of weight on there and she's obviously doing something with purpose and form and function. So I feel like there's a good line where we can toe the water and know, oh, okay. And for ourselves as well, I feel like it's easy to judge other people in the gym or feel like they're judging us, especially if you're particularly new in the gym.
Yeah, I mean, feeling like being judged in the gym is kind of hard to address because anyone who spent any time in the gym knows that you are at greater risk of being in a car accident on the way to the gym than you are being negatively judged and made fun of by someone behind your back at the gym. That's just a fact. Like, you see these news stories that blow up of some high school cheerleader making fun of some fat grandma at the gym on her Instagram, and these stories blow up because they very rarely happen, and everyone agrees that that's stupid, and everyone condemns it and makes fun of them, rightly so, and applies all the social shame to them, and hopefully they learn a lesson and do better next time. But it really doesn't happen, but it's one of those things that is hard. I haven't figured out the key to get people to understand that. It's hard to get people to feel okay about going to the gym. It's like, when I was first started going back to the gym, I was fat. I was big and fat, and I was doing little boy weights, and no one gave a crap. No one noticed me, I was just doing my thing, and they were probably happy to see some fat guy there trying to get in better shape.
And in my experience, I have not had one time where somebody said you need to get out of the gym. Every single time I've interacted with somebody, whether it was, 7 years ago when I first started working out to, working out again and doing stuff, every single time, the big gym lunkheads that you think of, I've never had one of them negatively comment. In fact, I've always had them on the opposite side. Oh, hey, if you do this, you'll get better results. So I feel like that's kind of the adversary jumping in our way of progress, of saying that people are going to make fun of us. Stuff's going to happen.
Great spacious building mentality.
Oh,
right?
Yeah.
It's like you'll be pointed at and mocked if you walk the iron rod path, which how fitting this analogy is about like fitness, the iron rod.
Oh, yeah.
So
if for me,
it's like one long barbell.
Exactly. My biggest motivator when I'm working out is when I see somebody who you could say is technically medically obese in the gym working out. They're putting up sweat, right? I feel motivated to keep working out for whatever weird reason that is. I know I look lanky. I'm not the ideal body type or whatever it is, but it makes me motivated to work out that they're doing it. So I feel quit being so self-conscious and just go to the gym. Nobody, in fact, you're probably going to run into the situation where somebody's going to be like, hey, do you want a spotter? Like,
yeah.
It's amazing.
I mean, it's like you saw this deification of like nurses and doctors and stuff with the pandemic, which I am anti-deification, but if we had to deify anyone, we should deify fat people to go to the gym. Like they're the actual frontline workers in the battle against like obesity and death and poor health.
Oh yeah, they said
they're the ones who are actually in the trenches fighting the fight and then eventually getting fit and being pulled out of the trenches, and which ironically in this war, the fewer soldiers you have in the trenches, the better. I guess the analogy breaks down there. Yeah. But they're the ones who actually deserve deification and praise, is, the fat guy on the elliptical or on the bench or on the deadlift platform or doing overhead press or whatever.
Because let's think about it. They're doing something that they weren't doing before, and that is 1,000 times % better than what they were doing already.
Yeah.
Even if it's one time a week, right? And that's why I want to go deadlift right now. Like, it's that motivational, thinking about somebody who's just starting, they've let themselves go, or maybe they're struggling with an injury, and that's why, and they're just now being able to recover and go to the gym. It's so motivational to see that they're pushing through it's very grueling and hard, and the mental effort that they have to go through to put all those negativity in the adversary's work. Because he doesn't want you working out, because you're glorifying the body that God gave you. So that's why it's so motivational for me.
Yeah. I should probably start wrapping things up, because we've been at this for about an hour. I know we've been kind of skipping around. Are there any other topics you want me to just like give a quick thought on the list here?
I feel like we could go We did an hour on these first 6 bullet points. I feel like if you wanted to, we could do it again, or we can just kind of hit it up in a Twitter post. It's up to you. Because I feel like if we start talking about that, it's going to be a lot longer.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely, I'd be down to do it again probably in a couple weeks.
Okay.
I would suspect. I'll talk to my wife and see what would work better for her. But there's 6 points there, and I see we covered miscellaneous point 1, so that leaves really 8. So we could probably get the other 8 done in about one. I would expect 1 more hour. We could talk about the other 8.
Yeah, the very last one we kind of already covered, so it's just 8 points left, and we've kind of dabbled in a little bit of all those, so I feel like that would be better on there. But this has really been great, Elliott. I can't believe it's been an hour. That went by really fast. So
yeah, it did. It was a pleasure. I'll let you know when I can do this again to cover the rest of the points. Okay.
Okay, sir. You have a good day, and give thanks to the wife for letting you do this. So.
Oh, she didn't let me. We coordinate these things.
Okay.
We do what we want, and we just coordinate with the other with consideration.
Okay, I misunderstood. I thought you had to get her permission or whatever. But all right,
No, it's more so hey, I want to do this. Means you have to watch the kids extra time. Is that fine with you? And just making sure that we have everything set up, because one of our kids is special needs, so you have to be considerate with these things.
Yeah, I understand it. I want to thank you for your time. So pretty much today we discussed the law of health and its relevance to Latter-day Saints. So if you got something from this, we would love to appreciate it. If anybody needs anything, I know I'm more than welcome to taking DMs and answering questions. And I feel like Elliott would be the same way. There's also the Desvit Discord, and you can just comment on the Twitter feeds or on Facebook as well. If there's anything that you'd like to kind of talk about more in the future, but I do appreciate your time, and that is this for Spiritual Danger Close. Appreciate it. Thank you so much, Elliott. Have a great day. Give my regards.
You too.